Hello, welcome to another Burgundy with Tweedy video. Any of you who are in the unfortunate position of having watched multiple videos on this channel will know that I have a bit of a thing for Gevrey Chambertin. I think somebody recently commented actually that they thought this was more of a Gevrey Chambertin channel than a Burgundy channel, which is possibly fair feedback. I do feature other villages from Burgundy, but this is clearly the village that I find most interesting and varied. Some of my favourite wines of all time have come from this village, Gevrey Chambertin, in the Cote de Nuit. I often talk about the pricing. It is very hard in the UK at least to find Gevrey Chambertin, just regular village level Gevrey Chambertin. We're not talking about the fancy parcels, the Grand Crus and the Premier Crus, but just anything with the name Gevrey Chambertin on. It's very difficult to find for under £60, I think, particularly here in London. So I once again recently did an order with Lay and Wheeler, that online wine merchant who seem to particularly specialise in selling on wine from third parties. They store wine for their clients and then you can buy their wine from them. And that means that they have a very broad range of all sorts of different things. And it's a bit of a sort of bargain basement sometimes to rummage around in. And I found what I believe is the cheapest bottle of Gevrey Chambertin that I have ever seen. And I'm pretty sure at least it is the cheapest one I have ever featured on this channel. This came in at £33.21. They are weird prices at Lay and Wheeler. I don't know how they end up like that, but that does include, this isn't sort of in bond or anything, that does include the tax, the duty and so on. It's a producer that I don't think I've actually had from before, Coillot. I assume it sort of rhymes with boyo, very similar, just a C instead of a B, but it's a pretty good vintage as well. 2017, the vintage I love the most. So I absolutely snapped this up. To me, this just seemed like a bargain. Whether or not it's any good, we are about to find out together, but 33 quid for a Gevrey Chambertin of a very good vintage, a vintage that I personally really like, just seemed like too good an opportunity to miss. So I think possibly the second cheapest Burgundy I've ever featured on this channel was one of those ones from that Everton's bin end sale. I'm using a new camera, so I'm even less sure which corner I should be pointing at. And that came in at just over £35. But yes, this has beat that by a couple of quid, and I think it's a better vintage as well. It could well be a crushing disappointment. It's unlikely to be outstanding, otherwise surely that would be reflected in the price. Try that with a little bit of holly in shot, because we are in the run up to Christmas. Where are we now? December the 15th, something like that. Nice label though. I always like these little shield shaped vintage labels. They're always nice. This is going to have to be a relatively quick assessment, I'm afraid, of this wine because I don't have much time today, only an hour or so. That came out a little bit easily, but it's not heavily stained or anything, so hopefully that's okay. Got bits on my glass here. Initially relatively darkish colour there, almost ever so slightly brown. Actually, no, it's not quite brown, is it? But a deep burgundy kind of colour on the darker end of the spectrum. Before the first swirl, getting one of those grapey notes, but quite sort of boozy and vinous. There is an almost liqueur-y sort of edge to that right from the word go. And now that's maybe morphing into a sort of cherry liqueur, or a bit like those maraschino cherries, those glacé cherries. It's quite appealing. We give that a little bit of airing, a bit of swirling. Okay, maybe now it's going more cherry. But yeah, I definitely say something in that kind of maraschino-y, glacé cherry kind of, slightly confected, or slightly, confected sounds like a bad word in wine, doesn't it? But talking about the character of the cherry, sort of confectionery type cherries, preserved cherries in a jar. Quite nice though, and veering into a hint of something perfumey there as well. Not exactly your typical floral perfume, not your standard rose and or violet, but perfume as in perfume you spray on, that sort of, I can't characterize what exact, I can't even remember what Chanel No. 5 smells like, but has sort of vague hints of that. And I almost think I'm also getting a little bit of something marzipan-y in there as well. So quite a lot going on there. Yeah, something sort of almondy, marzipan-y, glacé cherries. This is going a bit Christmassy. Are we veering towards some sort of Christmas cake type assemblage here? Marzipan, glacé cherries. Do you have glacé cherries in a Christmas cake? It feels like you might. That is a pretty good start, I think. So let's give it a sip. It's pretty nice on the palate. It's quite rich, getting a little bit more of that sort of Christmas cake kind of vibe from it. It's getting quite a sort of boozy feel to it. I don't know what the ABV is, but 13%, so I guess that's pretty typical, but it's really coming across as quite boozy. I wonder if I move that holly out of the frame that I might stop getting those thoughts of Christmas cake implanted in my head. Interestingly, it's simultaneously quite rich and quite dry. Maybe that carries on with that Christmas cake riff again, I don't know. There is definitely fruit there on the palate, but it's a little bit, yeah, maybe a little bit closer to sort of dried fruits, sultanas, perhaps more of those glacé cherries, that kind of thing. This does have a little bit of age on it now. It's 7 and a bit years off the vine, so I wouldn't expect this to be incredibly fresh and vibrant at this point. Some wines miraculously still are, but yeah, a little bit rich, a little bit dry, quite a boozy feel to it, dried fruits, a little bit of a papery, tannic sort of edge. I'm tempted to say like the kind of rice paper that a cake might have on its base. It was baking, you know, that sort of edible paper that some cakes have stuck to the bottom. A little bit like that sort of texture. There might be hints of spice around the edge. I mean, this is all going very Christmassy, isn't it? I promise this isn't a stitch up. These are just the thoughts that are coming to mind. They could be being thrust upon me by the holly and the onslaught of Christmas, but I'm definitely getting a kind of Christmas cake vibe from this. And yet, with all of that, there are these nice little touches of sweetness, nice little flashes of cherry, a little bit more, as I say, maraschino, glacé cherry, but that is really nice. It's doing a lot of things that I like. I like the richness of it. Possibly the acidity has fallen away a little bit. It's not quite as bold on that, in that sense, as some other Gevrey Chambertins, even of this particular age. Would perhaps like a tiny bit more sort of juice there, a tiny bit more acidity to make it absolutely perfect. It does come across as a little bit sort of dry and slightly papery. Not dry as in the, you know, dry weirdly can mean acidic. I don't mean dry as in acidic that way. It's not the absence of sweetness. I'm talking about dry as in the texture of it is dry. But that aside, I'm pretty happy with that. I think that's great for 33 quid. For Gevrey Chambertin, for, you know, one of the most prestigious winemaking villages in the world. Lovely. Well done, Domaine Coillot, and I appreciate your very generous pricing policy. And it may be, I don't know if this is a typical price for this producer for their Gevrey Chambertin. It may just be partly this quirk of the wine being sold on through Lay & Wheeler from a client, and the client may have bought it perhaps en primeur when it was first released and just never really had a great desire to turn a big profit on it. Perhaps they just wanted to offload some wine. So I don't know what the typical price would be for this via a different route. Those stocks at Lay & Wheeler tend to be very short-lived, so sorry if possibly this is even already sold out by the time this video goes live. But very interesting to me that you can find these bargains. Gevrey Chambertin doesn't have to, I mean, that's still by supermarket standards still an expensive bottle of wine, I accept, but it doesn't have to be stratospherically expensive. And I actually think that's really decent, and I think that does give you quite a good sense of the kind of power and the richness of Gevrey Chambertin as a wine style from Burgundy. A few unique, interesting things it's doing itself with that Christmas cake character, but none the worse for it. So I'm enjoying that. Cheers. Quick addendum, I may just drop in editing because I had at least one grumbly comment from one of my videos recently that I went on too long. I mean, just don't watch the videos, it's fine. It's a bit of a grey, gloomy day today. I often like to sort of play out with some scenic shots of the heath, but I actually came here yesterday and I was just at the tail end of a brief illness. I had some weird fever earlier in the week. I don't know what it was. I wasn't quite ready to open a bottle of wine yesterday, so I came for a walk to the heath, but it was a very nice sunset, so perhaps I can play you out with some shots of the sunset.